This is a bit of a strange video. Well, seeing as lighting conditions have been a bit, let's say, strange in my studio right now, since that has generally been problematic recently, I thought I might do how should I put it, a different sort of video. As some of you might know, I enjoy drawing out a lot of the world storylines and characters from my books and stories, and even my games. But more importantly, I like to draw the armor that different countries wear. Because it really does change depending on generally what the time period is, the technology they have, and the means and reasons for that armor. So, this is a little strange, but I wanted to show you how I go about drawing one of my favorite helms, and my preferred helm as an adventure. Basically, every time I do play D&D, this is the helmet I go for. And I think it makes the most sense for adventurers. And it comes down to a few reasons. There's protection, visibility, and finally, frequency. Or ease of repair, I should say. And this is why I fell in love with the Goggled Helm. It is possibly one of my favorite helmets, so I'm going to start drawing it out for you. So, if any of you want to follow me along and figure out how to draw it, please. It doesn't take much. All you do, as you can see here, I am using a number 2 pencil, Dixon Trichord Jet, or whatever, HB, a mildly sharp tip. I don't like usually to have the most sharpest, because if you have very, very sharp tips, then they tend to be just a little bit problematic in my case. So the first step we're going to do is just, like all helmets, it is built for a head. And the heads are generally roundish, so let's go with it. And start with the first helmet of this set. So, as we take a circle here, we're going to then slope down from here. What this is supposed to represent is the sort of area between the nose, which would be right around that spot there. You don't need to add a nose, I just added in because it reminds me where the nose guard will go. And generally the eyes would be found around in this location. This is a side view, of course, and you don't need to add in the eyes and all that. That's just from my notes. The mouth goes down to here, to a chin. Usually the chin is a point. It slides up to about 2/3 of the way, and the jaw line ends there. Now the head is slightly too big. I usually draw it a little bit too big because I like the idea that there's padding, and we're going to just trim that down a little bit so we get the proper size of a human head. At that point, we are going to take maybe about 1 centimeter out, and we're going to build the first section of our cone leading up. This will be the very basic part. This is known as a skullcap. It is probably the first kind of actual helmet that was really used during the Dark Ages. It's very simple. It's literally just a conical design, and it would literally just come across the skull like that. It was very, very basic. It was supposed to stop incoming blows, and it was generally the easiest to make. There were solid ones, but also you would find in some of the examples that they were almost welded from 4 different parts. This is actually not just in Europe. We actually see similar helmet designs in Mongolia, China, early Japan, basically everywhere, where basically instead of a single piece of steel, it'd be several pieces, and they would weld it together. Yes, weld it. They did have the ability to weld back then, though it was less in tune with the typical welding methods we know today, more along the lines of using a bit of hot metal to try and glue the two together, fusing the metals together, which I guess that is welding, and then using a hammer to just to make it stick a little better. It's almost like gluing the helmets together. The bits of metal together. I'm not a historian, don't get me wrong, but no, you're here to see me draw out the Goggled Helm, the famous Goggled Helm that the Nordic people would use. From here, we're going to go down a little bit. That helm bit would just extend down and create a nice nose guard. Usually, you'd have a little bit of a strap going down there, because obviously you don't want your helmet falling off. And before anybody says, no, I am not adding horns to this, horns are stupid. I mean, if I could, if I just added there, and then we go across like that, and we would have sort of these weird goat horns coming out. And I guess if you're a tiefling, you might need little holes for your goat horns. That might be fun, actually. And then it would just go like that. But that's a very bad rendition of that. But no, this would never happen simply because it's just another place I can grab you by the helm. I could just grab you by the helmet there. And though it is stylishly fashionable, it's really not a good idea for an adventurer, especially not an adventurer in D&D. Or just any situation. So we'll just erase that for the time being. Maybe I'll do another drawing of one of these helmets. But yeah, I said we extend the nose guard there. But you're here to see your goggled helmet. From the nose guard, we add in this little underbite. There. That kind of swoops up and reattaches itself to there. Now, I keep calling this a goggled helm, and I call it a goggled helm because that is what I learned to call it when I was younger. It is technically a spectacled helm. Take that as you will. But yeah, the helm then reattaches itself to there and attaches back to that nose guard. And traditionally you'd have it on the other side, but this is just a side view, so bleh. We'll get to a front view. And really, that is the basics. But if you want to add on, which I always do, you've got, what is the next thing a warrior is going to want? He's got plenty of now protection around his eye socket. He's got extra protection around the nose, so you know he's going to smack him in the face and break it. So what he's going to do next is probably reinforce the front. And just for decoration, let's make that a double scallop. And you could usually actually do this in real life by actually adding on another bit, and then there would be rivets keeping that section on. In the better helmets, it would just be a single solid piece, but I always like the sort of Dark Age look. And maybe we would add another ridge on the front there, leading from the nose guard. I gotta clean that up just a little bit. Little tip for you guys, use the back sides of your little twist erasers like these. Screw it. I am going to break down and use this just for now. This is why I don't like them. Ah, that's better. This one actually has lead. You can never tell with them. Though I've always found the lead inside these little things to be a bit too soft and a bit too hard to really figure. So yeah, like I said, we'd reinforce that bit there with another, because that's where most of the strikes are going to come in. And then we're going to reinforce the brow, like so. And that is going to wrap around into the back. And that'll generally keep the skull in one piece. I'm just gonna redo that real quickly. And then I'd add a little peak there. And that's actually that's more of a touch that I like to do. That wasn't actually often done, but meh, my fantasy world, I can add in my fantasy designs. This is actually a really basic helmet. Very, very basic. I'm trying to keep it easy. So now we got that done. And, you know, although this helmet is holding pretty well, I'm just going to add in a neck. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to then have to make sure that the back of this poor guy's head is kept in one piece. Actually, I don't think I did that very well there. I might redo that in just a second. This is not exactly my best work, but meh. You never do draw your best when you're recording yourself or in front of people. It's kind of just a thing that happens. I hope I haven't lost too much respect from my audience here. I'm just readjusting that. Gosh darn it, it doesn't look right. Oh well. But yeah, the next part that usually happens here is that the guy's going to want to protect the back of his head. Typically, he would be wearing a skull cap underneath, which was a general padded cloth, and that could extend down from his head and to his neck like so, and that would actually protect this front bit too. But no, we're not going to go with that because I honestly think that it's far better to go and add on an additional layer to that skull cap, which would be chainmail. Now, there are examples actually in real history where chainmail was not used, but instead, in its place, sorry, if I use chainmail, then you're not going to see any neck strap because that's underneath the chainmail. And the chainmail would go under his chin, like so. Granted, there were lighter versions that literally were just the back of the head, and it was just there to stop any determined attacker from cutting your head off. And although chainmail is a very effective defense against most people trying to, you know, destroy your neck, or generally just murder you, you can always do better, and I'll show you in just a moment after I just finish up this first one here. And I will actually probably try out a new design. And when I'm just about done with this chainmail, goes under the neck, a few darker rings just to show that it is adding a bit of a sway in there, because I'm not too good with 3D art, as you can tell. Just gray it up a little bit. And because I feel like it, I always like adding nice, lovely long plumes to my helmets. Now, the plumes, from what historical finds I've seen, we don't really see battlefield helmets like this have plumes per se. And it's probably because it's very easy to, like the horns, to simply grab the plume and use it against you. Now, in my opinion, it's usually easier said than done to grab one of these plumes, but what do I know? I wasn't a blacksmith back then. But yeah, let's do this again, and we'll cut to when I have finished off this next helmet real quickly. It's probably going to be very similar spectacled / goggle design, whatever you want to call it, and we'll get back to you in just a moment. Alright, I should be just about finishing up with the front bit here. And let's give this man a glorious little beard. Because beards, you know, beards were a fashion statement back then. It said you were a manly man, or that you had virility. I'm sorry, ladies, I am horrible at drawing women, just because I always make their faces way too angular. I will eventually try to start drawing females, but I think if I showed you some of my work where I try to draw girls, I would just insult you more than anything. So, like I said, the chainmail was actually a very common design. And we see that more often than not in the more upper-class warriors that could afford to have a chainmail admin tail. But another very popular design was instead splint. You heard me right, splint. Now, I hear a lot of you actually who probably go, okay, splint as in like splints for my arms and legs? Actually, pretty close to it, now I think about it. Yes, splints. Essentially, what would happen is that I, as your armorer, would essentially make this long back cloth coat made of either very thick wool or linen or leather, and on it, I would rivet these long, splinted pieces of steel. Now, how common these things really were, well, we don't know. All I can say is that it did happen. Whether it was the popular thing or not, meh, I don't know. I honestly don't think it was very popular, simply because, well, we don't really find many of them. I mean, if they were popular, we would find basically everybody who had worn them. If anybody has information regarding this, please tell me. But yeah, I'll just smooth out this art. I did that really quick. That's really sloppy of me. I usually like to add in a little bit more decoration to my drawings, but trying to sprint all through this, I do not like that second scallop. I'm sorry. So that goes up there, and then it goes back there. Kind of went for a more shallow look on this one. Had to actually add a little extension for the nose to be guarded all the way. I don't know if that actually happened. I don't think any real smith would forget that, but I think it looks cool at times. And just for good measure, I'll add in a cheek guard. But yeah, this was probably some of the more common designs we see in the Dark Ages, at least in the Nordic areas. And there's at least some influence in the Saxon lines. Why do I say this? Well, The Saxon full helm, essentially, came down to extending this cheek plate outward. And they would add riveted hinges to the front, the cheek, and the cheek. And it'd make this full plate around the face to actually protect you. So, it's very likely that when the Nords came and showed up with wearing these helmets, and by Nords I mean the Danish raiders and Norwegian invaders and Swedish raiders, though they weren't really called that back then. You had the Jute Vikings and, well, Vikings, oh, that's a whole nother video. I should say Jute raiders, which were the most prolific that invaded from Denmark to England. And the Saxons who were living in England probably looked upon this and goes, yes, actually, that's probably a very good idea, and took it up on themselves. As for the plume things, forget about it. I don't think anybody actually did that, but I wouldn't doubt there were some holdovers because it was common enough during the classical era. And I'm talking like Greek and Roman here. It was a good idea. It meant that you could be seen, and it made you look a bit more intimidating. It turned a man who was 5'5" into a 6-foot man by adding on that little bit extra. Say if I had a feather here. How about 2 feathers, actually? This would go up like that. And that one goes there, and oh god, I am never very good at when I draw feathers. There's a reason I always make these horsehair crests instead. But that adds on a good couple of inches to your height. One thing you guys will notice, though, if you're very observant and love history like me, is that this helmet isn't too different from the helmets we see the Crusaders wear in the next few years. And this has mostly to do with just the natural evolution of armor. These helmets, especially the Crusader helmets, were seen very prolifically in infantry combat, simply because cavalry really hadn't evolved all the way. By the time we get to First Crusade, we're still going around in helmets that look like this-ish shape, with this conical design at the top and a very, very basic nose guard at the front to keep your little snozzer in one piece. Like I said, this is a very, very basic design. But one of the strange things we see later on is that we lose this conical design. I'm sorry, this video was originally just supposed to be me showing you how I draw my favorite D&D helmet, but now this has turned into a historical rant, I don't know, is that we lose that very conical look. And we get what the French would call the iron hat. We start seeing a flattened helmet at the top there, and the extension of the nose guard, even sometimes down past the chin. And now, of course, this evolves a little bit, and we see a cheek guard come down, and eventually unite with that little nose guard. Wow, this is a really sketched look. I'm sorry you had to look at this horrible, horrible drawing. And we cover there. I can't really draw it very well here, but I have a little bit of a better design later in my book. So, bear with me for a second. Here we go. As we can see here, we see that helmet that was once such a lovely round, and this is actually probably a better drawing of what I was trying to do there. I had a lot more time to sketch it, but this gives inspiration to the creation of this. Now, these are of course a bit more fantasy looking, mostly because, well, it's my fantasy sketchbook. It's what I usually draw in when I'm playing D&D, or when I have ideas for cultures or ideals. A lot of this goes out to pure fantasy. For example, here, this whole, essentially a headband. You see them actually very commonly in the 15th century, sorry, actually 13th century on up, worn over the head. It's usually more decorative than anything. That's never been worn with this kind of helmet. Never worn. And oh my god, I added these weird horn-ish looking things. I was listening to a podcast about the Mycenaeans, the Thracians, and all those early Bronze Age civilizations. I kind of got carried away when I started hearing about the Sea Raiders, or the Sea People, as they were called. But honestly, yeah, this has kind of been a weird rant where I talk about my D&D helmet designs that I go with when I usually am drawing. But yeah, that's really about it. Rant done. I hope you got something from this, because I kind of just been rambling for the past, oh my lord, half an hour. Well then, hopefully we can edit this down a little bit to something a bit more manageable. I hope you enjoyed the show for a little bit. If you want to see more of my sketches from my sketchbook, I have an entire 3 other sketchbooks of my more recent drawings, with lots of kind of weird looks for my mercenaries, like this guy here. That's supposed to be one of my D&D characters. It was a really rough sketch I made of him. That's supposed to be Von Lumaris, I believe? His ears are round though, so I'm not sure what I was thinking when I was drawing that. And a few sword designs and just general practice. So yeah, I hope you got something from this. And, well, that's all for now. I hope to see you in the next video. And for now, keep on drawing, keep on playing D&D, and leave some comments down below on what you want to see next on this channel. My name is Michael, and I hope to see you next time in the next video. Have a good day.